Mr. Chairman. I want to first say congratulations to Ranking Member Raskin for his continued leadership and dedication to the committee. And Mr. Chairman, I want to congratulate you as well. It's been great working with you in the previous Congress, and I congratulate you also on your new position. I move to offer Amendment Number 4 to the rules of the Committee on Oversight and Accountability. House Rule 11, Clause 2M authorizes House committees and subcommittees to issue subpoenas for attendance of witnesses and the production of documents. This amendment will quite simply require a majority vote approval by members of the committee prior to authorizing and issuing a subpoena in the conduct of any investigation or activity within the jurisdiction of this committee. I think we have a real opportunity today to execute strong, bipartisan oversight. And this is a rule, quite frankly, that both Democrats and Republicans have supported in the past. And, Mr. Chairman, I'm particularly pleased that you supported this amendment the last time, and we hope today that it will carry. I hope we embrace this sort of moment so that we can show, quite frankly, the American people and members of Congress that we are still prepared in this committee to unite, regardless of our different political beliefs. And so I would encourage my colleagues from both sides of the aisle to support the amendment. I thank you, sir, and I yield back any time I may have remaining.
Gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes himself. Congressional subpoena is a powerful tool which should be used in limited circumstances. Its use is appropriate when attempts to reach an accommodation with a witness are at an impasse, when necessary to obtain certain sensitive information, such as financial information, or when a friendly subpoena is needed just simply to protect a witness. In the normal course of committee business, I hope to work with the ranking member on proposed subpoenas in advance. The American people have made clear that they want this committee to conduct fair and rigorous oversight, and we will do that. That will require this committee to work quickly and efficiently, and at times provide less opportunity for debate and markup in order to uncover the truth in the timeliest fashion. I appreciate Mr. Mfume pointing out that I supported this amendment last Congress, but you all opposed it. So we just want to keep the rules the way that you all had them in the last Congress with respect to things change, right? During the past two Congresses, committee Democrats, as I said, voted against this change and refused on at least 2 occasions my written request to vote for a subpoena before it was issued. And if we need to provide that for any fact-finding friends out in the audience, we will be happy to do that. Yet with this amendment, they now ask the committee to change its rules to give them rights refused to Republicans when Democrats were in charge. So as former Chairwoman Maloney pointed out, during our last organizational meeting, hundreds of subpoenas have been issued under both Republican and Democrat-controlled Congresses in this committee without any vote. Democrats have provided no valid reason today to depart from this precedent, so I oppose this amendment and urge my colleagues to vote against it. Does any member seek? Chair recognizes Mr. Raskin.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I rise in support of the gentleman's amendment. And indeed, one of the great things about Congress changing hands is we get to quote each other from the prior Congress. Mr. Chairman, then you did say the subpoena is a powerful tool, and notice and consultation are just common sense measures that the majority should afford the minority to the fullest extent possible. You're absolutely correct in rejoinder to point out that the majority didn't accept that. But I will say that if we're simply going to be on a race to the bottom, then the precedent was set by the Trump administration when President Trump said he would not cooperate with any subpoenas at all and simply shut down the process and ignored and rejected hundreds of congressional subpoenas. And I don't think we want to go down that route, and I don't think we want to encourage the Biden administration to go down that route. So I would encourage a complete reset at this point. Let's resolve to do better together. Let's issue subpoenas together, and let's make those subpoenas stick and work by making sure that the administration complies with them. I urge all my colleagues to support Mr. Mfume's amendment, and I yield back.
Mr. Chairman.
Does any further member seek recognition? Mr. Conley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, the issue of subpoenas in this committee has a long and sorry history. When Dan Burton was chairman of the committee, he issued hundreds of subpoenas, losing track of who he had subpoenaed, as a matter of fact, and it kind of made a mockery of the process. When Tom Davis, my predecessor, and Henry Waxman kind of switched back and forth as chairman and ranking member, they actually set a model where they genuinely did consult each other and try to cooperate on the issuance of subpoenas. Why is that important? Because from an institutional point of view, if we simply proliferate the world with subpoenas, we are going to dilute the importance of that as a tool, as you correctly pointed out, Mr. Chairman. It's a tool that ought to be used sparingly, and it ought to have force. I happen to believe that Congress ought to revive inherent contempt, enforcing subpoenas institutionally as the separate but co-equal legislative branch of government. That's a fight someday we will, I hope, revisit. But we want to make sure, I think all of us as members of this committee, that a subpoena has force, that it has meaning, that it has broad support behind it. And I hope as we move forward, that's the spirit in which we look at subpoenas and issue subpoenas for the sake of the institution, for the sake of the integrity of this committee. I thank the chair and the ranking member, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes Mr. Sessions.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, I do understand the debate that's going on back and forth. We've got a lot of members here who seemingly are also brand new. Back in 1997 and 98, when I sat on this committee, the gentleman, Chairman Burton, was in charge and was forced into having several hundred subpoenas. As a matter of fact, I remember items which I was in particular a part of with Johnny Chung, a communist Chinese who came to this country to infiltrate our national security, a man who did come in and compromise the Clinton administration, a man who compromised companies, a man who compromised to use political contributions, not just get in the White House, but to have the Commerce Department to allow export of important items of national security that dealt directly with rockets and their ability to work off a gyroscope. And it was one of the biggest political important things that Dan Burton did. The Attorney General of the United States chose not to answer questions when almost everybody in her department, including the U.S. Attorney from San Diego, who was bringing forth the case against Johnny Chung, and she used her political power to stop those things. National security, things dealing with not just this committee, but the entire country needed to know. And so he was forced to issue these. 3 times the Attorney General of the United States went into the hospital for exhaustion rather than coming to be a part of what this committee was asking for. So I'm aware of the games that get played. I'm aware of the things that are hidden behind executive privilege and other things. I would like to see us, as opposed to that now, since the shoe is on the other foot, to encourage this administration to be forthright as we ask things, because this committee and other committees have gained knowledge about how to use the power of not just this committee, but of Congress against Donald Trump. And if you don't think those things are not going to be expected now when the shoe's on the other foot, we've lost it. So I think that the ranking member and others on your side should use this as a commonality, a stick, to avoid what we have to do. But it means that you have to be forthright in an administration, which is an oath of office that you took. So I think that it's not lay down your sword and leave yourself defenseless. I think it is, let's work for common sense. I appreciate the gentleman giving me time to express my ideas.
Gentleman from Texas yields back. Chair recognizes the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Perry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just wanted to observe that now that Republicans are in the lead, it's not lost on me that suddenly it has become a race to the bottom. Don't you all find that fascinating? I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. But before we call for a vote, if I may, I'm excited about this newfound willingness to work with Republicans. So I think that we will have some opportunities, Mr. Raskins, to work together in the future on subpoenas. But Chair recognizes Mr. Palmer for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I congratulate you on your chairmanship and Mr. Raskin as ranking member. We have worked together before, and you are in our prayers. Having been on this committee previously and now returning, I think many of us who've been on this committee before have been through the process where we issued subpoenas and also issued evidence preservation orders, particularly involving the Obama administration and some of their administrators, and saw that those subpoenas and evidence preservation orders were not honored. And Mr. Connolly, the gentleman from Virginia, raises an interesting point about using contempt in cases where our subpoena power is not honored. I have full confidence that you will only issue subpoenas, Mr. Chairman, judiciously, and full confidence that you, Mr. Chairman, and your staff will not lose track of any of them. But in the case where we do issue subpoenas, or in cases where we issue evidence preservation orders, which I think could very likely be the case in this committee, I think we might need an additional tool to ensure that those subpoenas and those contempt and those evidence preservation orders are complied with, and that we do the duty, the due diligence that this committee is required to do in some of these investigations that we will most undoubtedly have to engage in over the next couple of years. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Just a few other words in support of my amendment. I've heard Representative Burton's name mentioned a couple of times, and let me just tell you this about Dan. He and I fought like hell on a number of issues, all through the 80s and halfway through the 1990s. But we tried to find where we could commonality on things that didn't push us and push the Congress in the wrong direction. In fact, we got in one argument in front of President Reagan, who jokingly said, well, can I take you guys out and buy you an ice cream cone and get you to agree? Dan and I we had strong differences, very, very strong differences of opinion. But at the end of the day, I thought where you could make a common sense argument, you could win over his support, and he thought where he could make a common sense argument, he could win over mine. And so when I look up at the portrait of Elijah Cummings hanging here, I'm reminded that Elijah always said, we can do better than this. And Mr. Chairman, you are absolutely right about the last Congress. You voted to have this sort of amendment in place, and the majority ruled, and in that instance, I think the majority may have been misplaced in its support. But having said all of that, this provides us with a fresh opportunity not to turn left or to turn right, but to go ahead together as a committee, recognizing if not, then who knows, 2 years from now we might be back in the same position with someone on the other side making the argument for this amendment. Life is too short for that, and I think more than anything else, when it comes to subpoenaing witnesses and documents, that there ought to be, at least where we can provide it, a semblance of unity, a semblance of bipartisanship, so that Democrats and Republicans are, in fact, agreeing on those subpoenas. So I would ask people just to kind of keep that in the back of your mind. Someone used the term reset, and I think that's the perfect word for this situation. We can reset the clock now and start moving in the right direction, or we can continue in the path we're going, which, as both the ranking member and the chairman said, is a back and forth sort of seesaw on whoever controls the gavel. I yield back. Thank you, sir.
Gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes Mr. Biggs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am fascinated on this desire for freshness, this desire for a reset. Having wandered through these halls for some period of time, what this rule is without the amendment is not dissimilar from what we see in the Judiciary Chair. And that happens, and we've been contented with that. We've lived with that. We know how it works. And quite frankly, we know how it works in here, because that's what my friends across the aisle have engaged in for the last 4 years. This is nothing unusual. The notion that this is going to provide unity if we adopt this amendment is almost laughable on its face. That it will provide a Secretary of State Clinton Russian reset moment is also laughable. The reality is we have disparity here. We view the world differently. Where we can find accommodation, we should and we will. But there is nothing unique, bizarre, or out of the order on the current underlying rule that we're going to be voting on. And so to say that we must have this freshness, this reset, and basically saying, well, now that you have control, we don't want you to treat us the way you've treated us. You don't want to be treated the way you've been treating us. And you're saying, please, please have mercy. And the reality for me is the pendulum may have gone real far to the left. It'll swing back a bit to the right, and ultimately it'll find equilibrium. And the equilibrium will come as we find points of accommodation, points that we agree on, and going forward. But this amendment does not begin to do what I think you're telling me it's going to do, and so I irredeemably oppose it.
Would the gentleman yield for 10 seconds?
I've already yielded back, but if I can, then I'm happy to yield to you, Mr.
I just want to set the record straight. I'm not saying, please, please have mercy. No, no,
Fair
no,
enough.
no. I'm a fighter. That's not what I'm saying.
Fair enough.
I'm saying, please, please, let's try to correct the wrong.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Thank you, and I appreciate that. And I think everybody on this committee are fighters. That's why we're on this committee, and that's part of the reason that we love being on this committee. We're each fighting for what we truly believe is the best direction in the country. Thank you, sir. Yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes the gentlelady from Georgia, Ms. Green.
I really appreciate the sentiments of bipartisanship. I think that's what's missing in Congress. But I would also like to remind the committee that after 2 years of a very heavy, controlled hand here in Congress and on committees where Republicans didn't have a voice, I in particular had no voice, having no committees, being stripped of them by our former Speaker and Democrats in Congress. I think it's also important to point out that as far as subpoenas are concerned and bringing up President Trump and how his family has been treated by Democrats, Eric Trump in particular has been subpoenaed over 400 times and has never broken a law. So I think subpoena power is extremely important. But I oppose this amendment because the Democrats have proven what they do with subpoena power, especially with the January 6th committee. And I think we can trust Republicans on this committee and our new chairman, Jamie Comer, to do a great job with it. I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. If no one else seeks recognition, the question is on the amendment. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. No. In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it.
Record.